everybody to Radicalized, where truth survives and we always have your back. We're on episode 47 with our very good friend Martin Sheil, who's going to be joining us in just a little while. I am with High Fidelity and Jim Stewartson, my shipmates on the Titanic, as we talk about the potentiality of a eulogy for democracy. But we got some fight. We got some action steps you all can take. So stick with us, please, as we prepare for the fight ahead. And also stick around till the very end of this episode, because you are going to get a Quincy sighting. And for our friends, you know what that means. So
spoiler alert. Damn, Heidi.
I know. Spoiler. Excellent. All right, gentlemen, I'm so happy to be with you here today. And let's go ahead and jump right into front.
Front-loaded.
All right. So I want everyone to use your words, okay? I want everyone to stop following the media when they say 291 election deniers are running for office. They are not election deniers. That is wimpy language in an information war. As Brent Allpress would say, they're seditious conspirators. As I would say, they are corrupt liars. So please, everyone, use your words. Words, writing, investigative reporting, all of that has never been more critical for democracy or the propagandist words in an information war. Jim, I'm sure you agree with this.
I would say cult members is a very good term, because if you believe that, you're in a cult. And it's important for people to get that. Then if people who believe big lie shit, believe QAnon, believe all this stuff, are suffering undue influence. They have ideas that are being put in their head by other people. They're in a fucking cult, and we should call them cult members, in my personal opinion. Corrupt liars is a good word too. Good phrase.
Well, the corruption is the big thing, right?
How much?
It's the corruption of the church. It's the corruption of business. It's the corruption of government. It's the corruption of military personnel. It's the corruption of intelligence personnel. It's just corruption everywhere.
Well, unfortunately, as Jason Stanley noted, that is a word that has also been weaponized to apply from those who are actually instigating toward those who are trying to defend democracy. But yes, we can Nandis words when we embrace the words that are coming out of those manufacturing the false narratives to hammer truth. We become part of the problem. So again and again, use your words. Please help fight this information war smarter and better. All right. We're just going to give you another little spoiler alert. Hi-Fi, I don't know if you can pull up the photo of Mary Parker, but I just want to tell you guys about a woman I met at the Women's March on Washington, 100 years old. I had this as my pinned tweet for years because this woman really, through having that as a pinned tweet, she connected me to so many people who really understood what was at stake. And I wrote, maybe it's the punk in me, but I love a good display of anarchy. And what could be more amazing than a 100-year-old who, shows up in a wheelchair and tells us to keep on fighting? It's very important. So stick around. She was feeling very salty that day, and I'm feeling quite salty at the moment. So stick around so you can hear directly from Mary Parker. Couple quick notes. Had the pleasure of doing an interview with Adrian Goldberg and our friend Imran Ahmed from the Center for Countering Digital Hate. Which is me before these interviews, because I'm always a nervous wreck who's afraid of everything. And then I just get in the ring because that's what we got to do, right? Super quick here. I want to offer another Jimphony, as we're going to call them, the best post, where he wrote, normalization of political violence is a late stage symptom of a failing nation state. I hope Jim talks about this more in Hellscape, but it's just very, very important that Jim not only delineates our social media platforms that have, undue influence all home, but he also offers some really simple fixes. It's not like we don't have things that we can do to prevent this hot mess we find ourselves in.
Yes, the steps are legal, practical, and apparently impossible. So yes, we will be talking about that
Well,
in Hellscape.
And Jim sets it up as a real great challenge to President Biden and those that work with him on policy. He gives them very good specifics and challenges them to take these. These are very simple cures to what ails us. So I actually am looking forward to hearing more about that. That's what I got for y'all this week. So let's jump into word phrase of the week.
Word phrase of the week this week is going to be anti-intellectualism. And, Jason Stanley, guest last week, he describes it anti-intellectual, fascist politics seeking to undermine public discourse by attacking and devaluing education, expertise, language. When education, expertise, and linguistic distinctions are undermined, there remains only power and tribal identity.
Yes. And if you look at one of the main targets, right, that they're going after big time is education, right? Peter Thiel's entire foundation is based on pulling people out of college so that they can work on Peter Thiel's anti-democratic companies. He's spent hundreds of hours speaking about how our education system is worthless, how no one should go to college, and importantly, how some members of society can't really handle college because of, who they are, what color they are, where they come from, right? Peter Thiel is buddies with Charles Murray, who wrote The Bell Curve, who is a scientific racist at the Manhattan Institute. These people believe that there should be a lower class, meaning all of us, that doesn't get to be educated because it's not really good for them, So that's what's going on here, is the complete undermining of everything that makes us equal, free, and American.
As you were speaking, Jim, I was just thinking, are any of these guys ever going to grow a conscience and snap out of it and start working for the side of democracy? Or are they just going to keep taking the cash and then, covering it up with, bullshittery?
Let me say for the 150,000th time, fascism does not stop on its own. It must be defeated. And that includes especially the people who have the power. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. Mm-hmm. They have money. They have power. They are fascists. We have to confront them. We have to defeat them. And there are ways. They're doing things that we have the power to prevent.
Mm-hmm. I'm just looking at you guys going, we're the three who could do this. So I don't know. Just felt like a little shot of optimism there somehow. Maybe it's just because Jim is so
if you say so.
Oh my gosh. I'm excited. I'm excited because even though we have a really serious interview with Marty, we have laughs, of course. But there are so many structural things that we could do, like now, particularly if we show up en masse on November 8th, that can actually help prevent autocratic capture and help defeat fascism. And who better than somebody who follows the money as a retired IRS criminal supervisor to tell us where those vulnerabilities are and how we can fix it. All right, gentlemen, let's jump right into why it matters.
Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Why hide Fidelity?
First story this week. There's a new sheriff in town. That's right. The EU has sent a new ambassador to Silicon Valley to enforce the Digital Markets Act, and very shortly here
Excellent.
to also enforce the Digital Services Act. These are two acts that were recently passed in the EU Parliament. I think my favorite line from this article was when the new ambassador stated, "This is not a negotiation, this is enforcement."
Bam. I mean, good. And Elon Musk is going to find out that, you know, he is not the only person with power, right? The EU stepping up and saying, look, there's still a bastion of people here that don't want to be traumatized, that don't want their fucking private information sold and spread and weaponized, is fucking amazing. And, you know, it's going to be a confrontation, and good, you know, we need it.
Yeah.
Because in America, it's not the Wild West. It's just, it's poison. We'll talk more, but yes, I'm very happy that Europe is stepping up.
You know, one of the cool things I like about democracy is that it really is truly a debate of the masses, right? And you have these, you know, politicians you vote on to put in laws in place that you think you need. And part of the reason the fascists want to dismantle democracy is because they don't truly want to debate. They don't truly want free speech. They weaponize these things. They rig them.
This is true.
Very much so.
Very much.
So that's why that matters.
Refer to episode 46. Refer to episode 46 on more of what Hi-Fi was just saying, where Jason Stanley goes into a deep dive on exactly that.
All right.
Next story. Holy rollovers. This comes to us from the Texas Tribune and ProPublica. This is the Johnson Act, right? This is churches. Churches are supposed to be about church, not politics. And, well, churches are now about politics. And the problem is the IRS is not cracking down on this. And I want to ask Marty about this. So we'll discuss. But why this matters is, you know, this country was founded on separation of church and state. Anyone who argues it's not has obviously not read Treaty of Tripoli, 1797, Article 11, in no means founded on Christianity. That's why it matters.
Mike Flynn said on Friday, on Friday, there is no separation of church and state in the Constitution. Verbatim, those were the words that came out of his mouth. That's what we're fighting here. That's what we're up against. Let me be very clear. I'm going to say this one more time. The fucking Constitution not only says freedom of religion, it says freedom from religion. That's what the Establishment Clause is. We don't have free religion imposed, but if you want to do it, knock yourself out. But there not only is a separation, the fundamental idea of American democracy is that we don't mix religion into our government. And we fucked it up in the 50s when we started putting under God on stuff. We put it in the pledge. We started doing all that. And we did the prayer breakfast that every goddamn president has to show up to, which is just run by the family, for fuck's sake. We gotta fix, but that's a battle for
well, it also had, that was also the time of McCarthyism and the Red Scare, and it was blah, and it was, I mean, this history just running again, and it amazes me. But anyway, next story. Trust no one. And what is this story about? Well, I'm sure by now you've all heard that Liz Truss's phone has been hacked. So first question is, why is she doing government business on her personal phone? Of course. Why was she using a Samsung? Oh, terrible choice. Anyway, that's a technical thing. But this goes to show that even if you do side nominally with Russia, if you're part of their team, you're just as expendable. You mean nothing to them. You're just another tool for the fascists. So, yeah.
I mean, they don't give a shit. Like, I mean,
Not at all.
The whole movement is founded on sociopathy, right? The whole idea of fascism is that power is more important than people. So if you're on that side, it means you're dealing with people who don't give a shit about you by definition, unless you can provide them with power. That means that you work for them. That's it. That's why it's authoritarian. That's how it works. So if you're on that side, at any moment you can become cannon fodder. You can get kicked to the curb. And the only way that you can guarantee your own position is by being more sociopathic than everybody around you.
Blackmail your blackmailers.
Good times.
Yeah,
that's such a great point.
Yeah, that's healthy, guys. Healthy.
It's also like there's been a lot of accidents among oligarchs and executives and noteworthy people affiliated with the Kremlin. And so, to Jim's point, there is absolutely no loyalty among these particular thieves. And I learned many years ago the questions when it comes to why does Putin do something, just because, like, we can't ask that of that particular type of psychopathy. So
yeah, I mean, we can't skip over.
Thank you so much.
We can't skip over the Russian window industry scandal, right?
All right. On a serious note, I want to.
It's really Windowgate is the next thing.
Real.
There's something deeply amiss in the Russian window industry. That's all I'm saying. I just, we keep skipping by it. We shouldn't do that.
You just inspired a short film. I want to make a short film on that. Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so I do want to end. I do want to end why it matters on a very serious point. One of the problems we have are bullies, gangsters, people who are lying to their flock from the pulpit, and we also have cybersecurity issues out the wazoo, right? There is an overarching theme to why it matters, because you need to deal with your bullies, your gangsters, your heretic priests and pastors and preachers, and your cybersecurity issues.
That sounds good.
Yes, and we need to prove that we are still a country of laws. Yeah, that's right. So I think that is an excellent primer for hellscape, a word that is being used by the people that we spotlight as enemies of democracy of late. So, Jim, let's jump right into hellscape.
Jim Stewartson's hellscape. Oh, fuck.
Hey, everybody. So I wanted to talk about this article that I wrote. We're in a very, very tough situation. And if you've been following me, following the show, I've been warning for quite some time that this period was going to be very intense. And unfortunately, we just haven't done any of the things that we needed to do to really get ourselves out of a situation in which one way or the other, there's going to be some form of conflict. I don't want to be over alarmist, but I do want to be an alarmist, to be perfectly honest. As I wrote here, the red lights aren't flashing. They're fucking strobing.
Boom.
We're currently in a situation very much like the 1850s in some ways. In the 1850s, there were fights in Congress. Everyone was becoming radicalized. You had, the Lincoln Douglas debates, and it was a very fraught and difficult period. But it was also delineated as much by geography as it was by ideology. And we don't have that anymore, right? What we have now is a conflict based on identity that has been in many ways enforced by psychological warfare. People who identify with QAnon, who identify with the big lie, who I identify as, neo-Nazis, white supremacists. These are all cults that people have fallen into online. And the net result of it is that we have a seditionist force that is coming from the inside out. And unfortunately, it has gotten to the point where political violence is being normalized, as we've seen with the reaction to the unbelievable attack on the Speaker of the House, the elderly and legendary Speaker of the House. Her home was smashed into. A guy with a hammer beat her husband almost to death in front of the police. And the reaction of the right wing was more or less celebration. There were a few, oh, tut tut, we shouldn't do that. But for the most part, it was at best normalization and in many ways celebration. And as I wrote here, normalization of political violence is a late stage symptom of a failing nation state. It just is. That's, if you look at every, country that has fallen, there's always violence and it is always political. And what precedes it, basically what we're seeing right now. So, and again, apologies for being so stark. But in a new civil war, in this next civil war, if it happens, you and your next door neighbor are enemies, right? In the 1860s, there was, this sort of heart-wrenching thought that brothers could be on opposite sides of the war. But typically those brothers lived one in the north and one in the south. Here they live in the same house. Or across the street. Your neighbor is your enemy, and your neighbor has a fucking AR-15. This radicalization of America has been going on for a long time, right? I put this chart together just to sort of get my own head around how many psychological operations that are clearly influenced by domestic terrorists and or foreign agents, right? How much of this warfare has been going on? Well, it turns out a lot, and it turns out on both sides.
Yeah.
And how does this happen? Why is this accelerated like this? Well, social media. And as I've investigated this, it has become clearer and clearer to me that social media is simply a misnomer. It's the word social media and is propaganda in and of itself, because it's not social. It's never been designed to be social. In the Pony Express started in 1860, right? But so right before the Civil War, there was a big sort of uptick for them in the ability to communicate quickly. But in that case, it was like you could communicate across the country in 2 weeks. That was high-speed internet. Now you can connect to basically everybody in the world in real time. And that is an insanely drastic exponential change that human beings have undergone. And who controls the mechanism for that? Who controls the mechanism by which you are connected to all these other people? How are you protected in that process? Well, you're not. And not only are you not protected, you're being weaponized for money and power. Here's how it works. And Facebook told us, right? The algorithm is not complicated. Advertising is how they make money, right? How do you get advertising? From traffic, from getting more people on your social media, right? How do you get traffic? From engagement, from people giving a shit and talking and from there being energy. How do you get energy? Anger. If you write something happy or pleasant, you get 20% of the engagement as if you write something that pisses somebody off. That's just how it works. Facebook knew it. Twitter knows it. All of them know it. It's built in. Anger equals money. Not only that, but our capitalist system requires that if one of those social media companies is public, like Twitter was, like Facebook is, it requires them to make as much money as possible for their shareholders because they're fiduciaries. That's literally, legally their job, and they can be charged if they don't do it. So we've created this, I wrote here, self-reinforcing multi-headed hate monster, right? Twitter, Facebook, these things are designed to radicalize you, and they always have been. And now we've got these guys running around using it against us. Who owns it? Who owns social media? Who are the people we're trusting with our fucking minds, with our system, with our civilization? Musk, psychopathic, pro-Putin anarchist. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg, who's just a teal android. I'm sorry. He does not have empathy. He doesn't care. And if Facebook is about to turn into 3D MySpace because it became a public company and Teal left the board. But it was still funded from the beginning by Russian investors and Peter Thiel. Truth Social, what is that? It's Putin puppet, Donald Trump, and Devin Nunes, for God's sake. The most, next to Dana Rohrabacher, the most obvious Kremlin asset in Congress. Rumble, which is pure 100% Kremlin propaganda. Literally, go to the front page right now and you will see some either tanky on the left or some batshit crazy right-wing nut job praising Putin or attacking Ukraine or attacking America. And it's got 70 million unique users because Peter Thiel invested in it, just like he did Facebook. Telegram, which also has 70 odd million people in the United States alone, is 100% cult brainwashing, insulated environments for people to be turned into fifth columnists. Who's it run by? A Russian national who lives in fucking Dubai. Andrew Torba is a Christian nationalist, neo-Nazi, pro-Putin, chud. And there's tens of millions of people on that stupid platform. Yay, just bought Parler, for God's sake. This is social media? Are you fucking serious? How did we let this happen? And not only is it this stuff, you got things like natural news, which I can't even begin to explain at this point, which is pure, harmful Russian propaganda, all coming from one guy. And there's a list of the websites that are just damaging people. We should be able to do something about it. As you may have noticed, there's a theme, right? This fucking list. Why is Vladimir Putin and the Russian government controlling social media? What is going on? So I tried to think, what is the simplest thing we could do to short circuit this spiral? Because that's what we're in, friends. We are in a spiral at this point. We have crossed the Rubicon from, oh noes, we may be in danger of losing our democracy, to basically we've lost it unless we pull some serious miraculous shit off. And I'm sorry to say it that way, but I don't see a way out without major conflict. And the reason is because we've done nothing to stop it, despite many of us screaming our heads off about exactly the situation we're in. It's not complicated. Arrest some criminals, for God's sake. The people doing it in public right now, in front of you. Put them in prison.
Yeah.
It's if somebody's committing a fucking crime in progress, the cops come and they fucking arrest them and put them in jail. Mike Flynn is in public building a Christian nationalist neo-Nazi fucking army. Mm-hmm. That is a crime. It is the worst crime you can commit against America. He is engaging in warfare against the United States. He can be arrested by the Secretary of Defense or the Department of Justice or any goddamn local community he happens to be in, because he's committing treason wherever he is. It's not complicated. He's committing crimes. Arrest him, and Steve Bannon and the rest of these guys who are just doing it in public. You're not allowed. You're just not. We don't need a 2 or 3 year investigation to figure out what's going on here. So that's number one. Number two, get the goddamn Russians out of our country. What are we doing? Why have we completely lost the ability to even see it, much less talk about it? Our social media, which connects to the brains of all of our citizens, cannot be controlled by the Russian government, who wants nothing more than the absolute destruction of us. Third, social media should not be a purely private enterprise. It can't. As I described, it's like water. at this point. You need it. We can't escape that anymore. We can't escape needing the connection we have to people and to information. That is not going away. Mm-hmm. But it has to be something that isn't going to kill us, right? It's like, think of social media as water. Right now, we're all living in Flint. We're all being poisoned by our own environment all day long. And it's ruining our ability to think, just like lead does. These are not difficult steps to take. They're legal. They're practical. If you don't believe me about Mike Flynn, believe fucking Paul Eaton. So look, it's been a long haul, and I just need to kind of say this out loud. And, you know, our government, this administration, our president, needs to not just be a good man, which he is. I think we all feel that. I think we know Joe Biden is a good man. I think we know that the people in the administration and Congress, are trying. But we have to step up now from being good to great. We can't afford to hope that the goodness of America is going to prevail, because the goodness of America is being snuffed out. So we need leadership. We need our president. We need our friends, people in society, to switch gears. We're all good people, right? We all feel that. Anybody who's listening to this show. But we have to be the next greatest generation here, right? That's what it took to save the world 100 years ago. And that's where we are again. So I'm asking if anyone is listening, step up. There are simple things we can do. Arrest the criminals. Get the foreign interference out of our country. And fix social media so it's not poisoning American minds.
All right. So as November 8th approaches, we thought it would be very important to bring in the big guns. And by big guns, you know that we are talking about RadPod's very own financial correspondent, Martin Sheil, who knows more about following the money than anybody I personally know. Marty has been a great source and a great comfort to me for many years now. And we have some structural reforms that that we absolutely need in this country, and what happens on November 8th will indicate whether or not we have a shot at them. But Marty, of course, retired IRS criminal investigator. We talk about you every episode. Marty, I want to start with the most important thing on my mind, and I think the gentlemen share this concern. How is it that a chaos agent can purchase the public square during an information war? And quite frankly, as you know, I am talking about Elon Musk, who has been essentially dictating public policy on his Twitter feed on behalf of Vladimir Putin et al. How is this possible? What's wrong with us?
Well, Heidi, thanks for having me on, I think.
Great to see you, Marty.
Okay, all right. Well, how about I answer a question with a question? What do Elon Musk and Donald Trump have in common? Okay, think about that for a second. Okay, all right. Answer. Go ahead.
They're both fake rich guys.
Well, I think you actually have two answers in one there. They're both kind of fake, and they're both kind of rich. But one thing that they have, I think the answer I was looking for is they both went to the University of Pennsylvania Wharton Business School.
Musk did, huh?
Yeah,
that's fascinating. They're also both malignant narcissists. We shouldn't skip over that. But go ahead.
I wasn't finished yet. No, the full answer was.
Can I have an answer?
Okay, I throw in your hat.
They both know Dana Rohrabacher.
Okay. That's a little esoteric. I was going for they're both boring. Donald Trump is boring with his constant repetition of the big lie, and Elon Musk actually has a company that he runs called Boring Inc. So that's a little trivia that you can raise, and next time you're having a few beers. Question. High five.
Can I also state that both of them are parasites burrowing into our democracy, which may ultimately kill it?
They're not just burrowing into our democracy; they're boring into it. Thanks for setting me up there.
I'm here for you, Marty. I'm here for you.
Yeah. So there's lots of parallels, obviously. Again, Marty, you always follow the money, and you've taught me to do a very good job of that over the last few years as an investigative reporter. That's something I'm used to doing, but you are always referring us to the offshoring world, the Panama Papers. We're always, really trying to make connections. And right now, what we're seeing is out in the open. We are seeing people get into business deals that affect the health of our country, the health of our psyche, and we are seeing them collaborate right out in the open with foreign nation states that do not have America's best interest. Right. And I want to know why and how. How can it happen in 2022 when we have been in the great information war for a minimum of 6 years, if not longer?
Right. It's our legal system. It's you ask about Musk and his influence and his impact. It all comes down to money, and Musk has more money than anyone. He is the richest man in the world, outside of maybe Vladimir Putin. And money gets you power. It buys you media, buys you some of the most significant media in the world. And one thing Mr. Musk is going to find out, and one of the issues that I want to touch on here is, Mr. Musk is a free market capitalist. He's somewhat of a libertarian. He believes in freedom, unfettered freedom of the internet and social media, etc. But what he's going to find out really quickly is he's a self-admitted micromanager, and he is going to find out that folks are going to be pushing back. They're already pushing back on Twitter now with removal of all these executives, the removal of controls on Twitter. There is just rampant racism being tweeted out, as well as sexism and whatnot. And, Mr. Musk, who's all for freedom, is going to find out quickly that there are limits, and there are necessarily limits that, you just can't scream out fire in a crowded movie theater. The same with social media. You just can't. There has to be some limit. And where those limits are drawn is a question that our legal system has been wrestling with for some time. and may well continue to wrestle with, for a long time. And I always go back when we talk about money in politics. I always go back to Citizens United, the Supreme Court case, where the Supreme Court ruled that there are no limits on corporate contributions to political campaigns, that corporations are people, and that money equals free speech, and there are no limits on free speech. So what's going to happen here, and what has already happening, is we're seeing that some foreign folks are contributing monies in local, state, and federal elections, and some of these folks are Russians. Some are actually on part of Russian intelligence agencies, and they're putting their money into the corporation. American Ethane Corporation is the actual name of it, AEC. It's an oil company down in Louisiana that was blessed by the two conservative senators down there. Donald Trump loves American Ethane. You have Russian oligarchs like Roman Abramovich and others who have significant holdings and shares. And those folks, these Russians, are using the corporation, AEC, to contribute money into various elections, and there are no limits. This company not only is owned by Russians, it's contracted with and selling ethane to the Chinese in large volumes. I mean, Roman Abramovich is sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury. He is not supposed to, he has so many yachts, they refer to it as Abramovich's Navy, and the Democratic task force is looking to, watching those yachts and looking to seize and forfeit them. But my question is, why isn't Department of Justice and this task force looking to seize Mr. Abramovich's ownership in the American Ethane Corporation? What is holding them back? It couldn't possibly be lobbyists, who prowl the Beltway corridors and protect major political contributors. It can't be Southern conservative senators who, looking to protect American Ethane Corporation. Who else could be? Maybe Department of Justice. Are they going to back off, or are they going to respect the Supreme Court's ruling in where corporations have no limits and can donate as much money as they want? And so, this is the issue. This is what's threatening.
That's right.
This is what I talk about.
We were very, very blessed to have a very brilliant guest last week, Yale professor Jason Stanley, who's a philosophy professor and who wrote the book How Fascism Works. And he said, either we're a rule of law country or we're not. And he specifically was responding to a statement he gave to the January 6th committee, where, those who led the attempt to overthrow our government must be punished. So either we're a rule of country or we're not. And Marty, every time there's an indictment, every time one of these Russian oligarchs are sanctioned, indicted, anytime we see some, Steve Bannon, getting a 4-month sentence, I'm always sending that to you, because in return, I'm hoping that you reassure me that we are a country of laws. Are we or are we not? Are we a rule of law country in 2022, on Halloween Day?
And the answer is, I don't know anymore. Money seems to dominate politics. The Supreme Court has ruled that there are no limits to corporate contributions, that, money equals speech, and there is no limits to free speech. So folks like Elon Musk or Roman Abramovich, it doesn't really matter, oligarchs from what country they're from, money buys protection, it buys power, it buys control. And that's what we're dealing with in this country. Question.
No, I was just saying, preach it.
Hallelujah. Yeah, all right.
Yeah, amen. Because speaking of amen, here's one I got to ask you. I have been watching. We have been watching Mike Flynn travel across the country, go into churches, radicalize the congregation, preach politics. Preachers are preaching politics in a bunch of churches. That kind of makes me feel like they should lose their tax exempt status. Where's the IRS to enforce it? Help me out.
Right. Well, I think the IRS is running a little scared. I mean, years ago, the Tea Party, which was a conservative group in Congress, run pretty much by Newt Gingrich, but then you had folks like Jim Jordan and our recent chief of staff, Mark Meadows, kind of took the reins of the Tea Party, and
Ginny Thomas.
Yeah. Okay.
Robert Mercer production in part.
Right. I mean, the list is pretty endless, but the IRS has the smallest function in the IRS is a small little group of very dedicated and hardworking folks called EPEO, which stands for Employee Plans Exempt Organizations. And they're responsible for monitoring charitable organizations and foundations, 401cs and whatnot. And Newt Gingrich and the Tea Party got really upset when the IRS started taking a pretty close look at some of the organizations, exempt organizations affiliated with the Tea Party. And their vengeance was unlimited. They came back at the IRS and threatened to cut their budget. In fact, did cut their budget for years in a row. And the lady who was in charge of exempt organizations ended up resigning. She was pretty close to being fired and run out of town on the railway. But and that's the problem with trying to audit or any type of religion or exempt organization or charity. I mean, the IRS is responsible for doing it on a federal level. States do have their own state regulatory authorities that look at it. But, I remember way back when I was a newbie auditor, and we had New York City Police Department officers coming into IRS audits because they claimed that their houses were churches and that they were or temples, and that they were the priest or rabbi of their own little church, and therefore they didn't have to pay any taxes because everything charitable monies are not taxable. That's nonprofit. So we had to crack down on that, and when you abuse something, the law enforcement, whether it's tax enforcement or not, they need to crack down. They need to enforce voluntary compliance with the law, and they do that through deterrence. So what they try to do is audit someone or criminally investigate someone and prosecute someone for violation of the tax law, in hopes that the media reflects that, and people see that so-and-so Sun Young Moon has been prosecuted for tax fraud, and therefore, if they can do that to Sun Young Moon, they can do it to me, so I better comply with the law. So you comply because you're deterred to some degree. And that's the whole idea of tax compliance. And it's a fine line, though, when you start getting into auditing or investigating churches. And then you get churches who they're not supposed to advocate politically. It's against the law. It's
the Johnson Amendment. It's the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So I remember my sister ran the largest foundation on Staten Island, and she was asked by the Staten Island Advance to introduce Hillary Clinton at a political rally, and it was quite an honor for my sister to do that. But she was scared out of her mind because she knew that if she came anywhere close to demonstrating public support for Hillary Clinton, she would be jeopardizing the tax-exempt status of that foundation. And so the same issue is out there with churches, with folks who, from the ministry on Sundays, advocate for a politician or for a party, political party. They're really risking their nonprofit status and losing their exemption. So
apparently, it's not a risk, though. That's the problem, right? Like,
well,
I mean,
there's risks everywhere. There's risks enforcing
Christian,
the law as well as
right. But the entire Christian industry right now is political.
Yes, that's right.
All of
In fact, Anthea Butler said it best, another incredible professor, when she said that evangelicals have now become a political party, right? And Republicans have become a religious cult. And it's like, makes perfect sense to me. So
white Christian nationalism. I mean, look at some of the, I keep going back to it, but maybe because I'm obsessed, maybe I got a little of that OC of yours there, Heidi. But look at the Supreme Court. Look at this most recent justice, Ann Barrett Comey, or Comey Barrett, or whatever her name is. I mean, and look at Judge Thomas. So if you look at their rulings, so much of it sounds almost like theocratic, that they're replacing the law and the Constitution with, basic Christian script. And that's scary. I mean,
Amy Coney Barrett's in People of Praise, which is a very, very extreme cult where women are literally subjugated to men by law in their religion, and the only people that they can listen to are 5 old white men. No offense, Marty, I am one too. Who are the arbiters of everything. They're literally called the arbiters, and so Amy Coney Barrett isn't actually beholden to the Constitution. She's beholden to these guys, and these guys are misogynistic cult leaders. And yes, so it is. There's a reason why her rulings sound theocratic. It's because she grew up that way.
Yeah, but it's like our SCOTUS is like turning into something like from Iran, or Russia, the Russian Orthodox.
Well, that's the funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah,
that's the funny thing, is that they can't. So all of our conservatives here in America freak out about Sharia law and immigrants who practice Islam, and but they can't see the same behaviors in themselves. Right. The subjugation of women, the religious law over civil law. Why?
Well, the whole Putin wing of the Republican Party, as Pelosi referred McConnell as leading. Putin takes his marching orders from the Russian Orthodox Church. He believes in white male Russian Orthodox Christian nationalism. Very anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, and just anti. If you're not white and your values are from like 30 years ago, then get out of here, get out of town.
And it's interesting that you bring that up, speaking of the Putin wing of the Republican Party, because the more closely I've been investigating everything that's been happening in the last 6 years, the more I see the white supremacy, the white nationalism aspect. And of course, that's a major link between the GOP and the Kremlin. But Jim points out that the actual gateway drug is misogyny. And I think that's very true. I think we see that through line through all of this. And Jason Stanley pointed out, we are one day away from Rovember, hopefully. Jason Stanley pointed out that part of the reason why an authoritarian capture includes taking health rights and reproductive rights away from women is because you've just taken away freedoms from half the population. So it actually makes sense that you would actually start there.
Right. So how do you enforce the tax law in terms of regulating churches and exempt organizations it's a slippery slide to do that, because look at how the IRS budget has become a political football. The Democrats, after years and years of cutting the IRS budget by the Republicans, finally this year passed legislation which allows the IRS to buy brand new computers and software that, is still using computers and software from the 60s to hire new people to do audits and conduct audits of multimillionaires and billionaires. This is stuff that really needs to be done. But the Republicans are now running commercials, in the run up to the election in a week, saying that, hey, elect us and we'll claw back all those monies that the Democrats want to give to the IRS. They're basically announcing that they're going to vitiate the IRS budget, and because that's a good thing, and that's mindless, and it's going to hurt tax enforcement. I mean, nobody likes taxes. I mean, and nobody likes how the government spends tax money. But Oliver Wendell Holmes once said that taxes are the price we pay for a civilized society. And I think that's so true. And you don't have to like it, but it's like going to the dentist. You do it, and you put up with it, and because it's good for you, and you need to do it, and that's what's kind of scary to me, is you take away the financial foundation of our democracy, which is the best tax compliance system in the world. You start attacking that, and what are you left with? I mean, how are you going to pay for those B-1 bombers and those nuclear submarines and aircraft carriers that protect all of us? And it's a scary world we live in. When Russia can invade their neighbor and threaten them with nuclear weapons, we're looking at the face of World War III here. Could happen at any time. Boy, I feel better knowing that we got lots of nukes and B-1 bombers and stealth fighters and Abrams tanks and aircraft carriers, that are going to protect me and protect everybody around me.
Let's be clear. Russia just invaded the town square, right? Literally. You got a guy who's negotiating on behalf of Putin, who just bought the most influential social media network in America, right? That is war. It's warfare, and it's amazing that people don't, understand it.
Well, it's really what this whole show was, founded on. I'm still kind of hung up on the fact that we don't know anymore if we are a country based on laws, and what do we do about that? We had David Pepper on, who said we're always playing offense. I mean, we're always playing defense as Democrats, as people on the left side of the spectrum. We're never playing offense. And he pointed out how insidious the game is on the state level, and how we always think if we can get our, Democratic president and, hold the line on the House and Congress, that we're going to be okay. But you keep pointing to the flaws in the system, the Citizens United, the ability for somebody who clearly is a Russian asset to have been our president for 4 years and able to put people on the Supreme Court to do the work of the theocratic,
SCOTUS.
Conservative. Yes. So I look at all of this, and it's hard not to get demoralized, which is also part of an information war. How do we fight back? Jim has some great ideas on how to fight back on the information war, which we discussed earlier. But how do we fight back? Obviously, it does start with what happens on November 8th. But what happens on November 9th and 10th and 11th when the state houses are still under siege and our election systems are under siege and our school boards are under siege? This is not going to go away unless it's defeated.
Yeah, well, I start with limit the amount of money that can be contributed to political campaigns. I mean,
All
money
right.
is the corrosive effect of, you talk about a rule of law. This is a country of rule of law, but the rule of law only seems to favor the rich and the folks who have money, who can pay
Okay.
to get the laws that they want written in the manner that they want and enforced in the manner that they want and need.
Okay. Okay.
You've got to start there. Limit the amount of money that can be contributed, limit the amount of money that can come in from offshore or from internationally, globally, and limit the amount for each person running for office, and start there. Get money, get the corrosive impact of money out of elections. Otherwise, you're not going to have a democracy. I mean, we might as well just get an autocracy. I mean, that's what we're headed for. That's
Right.
what Musk wants. That's what Trump wants. I mean, we're
Right.
getting so close to having our own Putin here, or
Right.
own mullahs from Iran,
Right.
or Z from China.
Right.
That it's scary. And
Right.
so start. Yeah, you asked the question. That's my first. That's where I begin. Get the money out of politics.
Beautiful. That's exactly what we needed to hear. Don't you agree, guys? Like, that's it. If we know where to focus the fight, we can be more effective. We can direct people there.
Yeah, I mean, the only issue with it, right, is that it's a legislative fight, and so the question is, are we going to have a functional legislature ever again? is my big concern, right? Because if we win both houses, the level of violence and pushback is going to be terrifying, and if we lose, it's just going to be a series of escalations until we reach a constitutional crisis. So either way, it feels like we're headed towards a conflict, based on the legislatures not being able to function and do laws. Either way, whether we win or lose, I'm looking for a way out.
Jason Stanley also pointed out to everybody who has not voted yet, who's listening, that
Fucking
this
vote.
may be
Stop listening.
This may be the last election where your vote matters. So we are hoping that resonates with people. And as Jason
the
also
pause button
said,
is in the lower left. Press it and go fucking vote.
As Jason also said when he was citing Plato, kind of an aborted version of Plato, that fascism is not good even for the fascists. Okay, so none of this is good. I do want, Hi-Fi, go ahead and get your question in, but I do want to talk about a couple cases that are occurring, so we actually can smoke a little hopium for the masses here. But Hi-Fi, you go ahead and ask.
So the two things are combined. Marty, you talked about the power of the IRS to enforce, auditing corporations and rich people. And you talked about what I mean, it's referred to as the arsenal of democracy. That's what we are. We're the ammo case to give people the right around the globe to self-determination through democracy. Case in point, Ukraine, right? And it just amazes me that people don't see that if you attack the IRS and their ability to tax the citizens, corporations, you're not going to have that arsenal of democracy, and fascism will win. There's a fine balance that needs to be attained there.
Oh, I agree, and but everybody needs to buy in. Everybody needs to understand that hey, it's like eating spinach. Like it, but it's good for you, and we need to support it. And I think that with the advent of 24/7 media and the tribalism that goes on with the politics, that IRS and the tax system is becoming just another political football, and some things should be sacrosanct. I mean, you know, Caesar even noted, the importance of taxes. He says, give unto Caesar what is Caesar's, but give unto God what is God's, and there is a division, and it goes back to the beginning of civilization, and it's being chipped away, and it's scary, but you see the rule of law being chipped away. You see, maybe I am becoming an old fogey, maybe I am sinking into old fardom. I don't know, but it just means that, the very fiber of democracy seems to be weakening, and I'm very concerned about it. Another question.
As are we all. As are we all.
Okay.
And I would like to point out that the reason I asked about the whole church thing, because the people who are supposed to be getting God's share also seem to be stealing Caesar's share too. And that's a problem.
Okay, so I'm tasking Jim and Hi-Fi to come up with another philosopher to quote, so we can do Plato, we can have Caesar, we can have some great old school stuff. I was going to open with a dirge from Mahler, but I didn't get my act together.
Those who can make you believe absurdities can
Yes.
make you atrocities.
Which would be
Voltaire.
And any minute now, we're going to throw in some Trotsky. Okay, so
actually, no. Anytime we bring up Peter Thiel now, I'm just going to hit people with a copy of Foucault and his treatise on the carceral system. If anybody says Peter Thiel is good for the world, just read some Foucault. Just hit him in the head with it. Here, take this.
All right. Books are important, Marty.
Esoteric philosophy. Sorry.
Well, we did an interview with a Ukrainian soldier who was quoting Dante, in the same sentence where he was quoting Socrates, and the educational system clearly seemed to be working, wherever he went to school. And it made me think about what a tragedy is that people do not read books, because the people who I know read books are the people whose brains I rely on in order to do the best investigative work I can do. People who have that rich experience and that education. And of course, something that we all know about, and we talked about it earlier on the show, is anti-intellectualism, which is a part of fascism. So I do have a couple things, though, because I promised we're going to smoke some hopium, because I'm not going out on a dour note, not when I've got Marty here. I would like you to talk about whichever aspect of the Trump legal woes that you wish to. I'd like to talk about possibly the subpoena, or the Mar-a-Lago documents and the impact of the special master, or maybe the congressional request for Trump's tax returns, whichever piece of that you want to bite off. I personally think the subpoena was interesting. Jim does believe there's going to be an indictment, clearly not before the midterms, and he's just going to speak victimese and try to sell himself as a beleaguered victim in all this.
Well, I think Trump faces a real conflict with whether or not to comply with the congressional subpoena. It's an internal conflict. It's he lives for television. He loves to see himself on television, and he would love to have that platform to continue to spread the big lie and all of his other Trumpisms. But I think it's been made clear that it won't be live TV, and that there will be limits, there will be pushback. He will get cross-examined, and you would have to think that his attorneys are begging him not to basically indict himself. I mean, because he's been out on the campaign trail this past month or two since Mar-a-Lago took place, and he has made a number of statements against self-interest in terms of saying that the records that were taken were his records, that all the records in the White House that were transferred to Mar-a-Lago are Donald Trump's records. And that is blatantly false. And those are the government's records. And he's an ex-government employee, and he's not entitled to those records. And it doesn't even matter whether they were classified or not. They're government records, and he's retaining government records, and that's against the law. And he obstructed the FBI from getting those records back. And I mean, I think that's a slam dunk case. And I think, I don't know when that case will be brought, but that is an indictment waiting to happen. I understand that Department of Justice has recently brought in a expert national security attorney who probably lead up the prosecution team on the Mar-a-Lago stuff. But and part two of your question was, the special master part. And I know I was in the minority. I wrote a piece saying that the special master is actually going to be beneficial to the government when it's all said and done, because he's giving the documents, the evidence, an initial judicial scrub. And, some document, it doesn't really even matter how many documents. If it's even one document passes the special master scrutiny, that will be a government document that Donald Trump wasn't entitled to, that he stole and didn't give back. So, and obstructed the government from getting back. So as far as I'm concerned, Donald Trump can appeal to the Supreme Court. He can appeal wherever he wants and try to run out the clock. And I think that's what he's going to try to do. But, the Department of Justice investigation that's piggybacking off of the January 6th congressional investigation, I think is lethal to Mr. Trump's future freedom. He is going to get indicted. He is likely going to get sentenced. And I can't wait for that to happen, because it's a simple case. And when you're dealing with the law, you want to keep it simple, stupid. You want to follow the KISS theory,
Yes.
and those Ivy League types out there, Occam's razor. Make it do the sharpest, most efficient, point 1 to point 2 straight line prosecution. There's government documents that they found in Mar-a-Lago that didn't belong to the ex-government employee there, and that's the end of the case. Don't make it any more complicated, and go from there. Now, in terms of the January 6th insurrection, seditious conspiracy type cases, I look forward to that being fully investigated. And I'm hopeful on that, but that's going to take a long time, and who knows where that'll end. In terms of the Trump tax returns that Congress requested, subpoenaed close to 2 years ago, that's been appealed over and over again, and at every level of appellate review, the courts have found that Congress is entitled to Trump's tax returns.
Right.
And once again, they found that. The full appellate court found that to be true this past week. Now the question is, will Trump's legal team appeal that to the Supreme Court? Will the Supreme Court even take that case? And what is the time frame?
Yes and yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean,
And
Congress,
will they recuse themselves?
well, justice delayed is justice denied, because this Congress has like 2 months to go, and then they're done. And that, if the Republicans take over in the midterms, that Democratic controlled committee that subpoenaed those tax returns, they're out of luck. They're done. And you'll never see. And that's the Trump legal strategy you see over and over and over again. And it's just, the guy's a master at delaying justice. I mean, and where does he get the money to buy, for all these attorneys to fight all these different cases? Well, it's, his PACs. Every time, he feels that he's been, the search warrant at Mar-a-Lago or whatever it is, he claims he's, he surfaces his grievance publicly and says, hey, support me. It's a rich one,
He's
against
good at
me.
that. He's good at that.
And money comes flowing into the PACs, which he uses, he's allowed by law to use to pay for attorneys. That's got to stop. talk
That
about
would be
it.
that would be, yeah.
Stop that right there.
That would be a deep structural reform that if we can hold the House, that we would need to see. I just want to point out that every time Marty appears on this show, an angel gets its wings, and that those were the bells that you heard ringing in the background. So, so we only have 1 more minute, and we've already given people some good things to focus on. We have a very great activist group who follows us, so we know that it has to be caps on, certainly at least get the foreign money out of our elections. That would be very helpful. And Hi-Fi, it looks like you wanted to say something before we part with Marty here.
It feels like, how everyone constructs a narrative through which they relate to the world. My narrative right now feels like the cliffhanger of season 1 of this insanity was the subpoena has been delivered. And now we're in a reality television show where everybody in the country has to vote. Do we continue to season 2 and watch the prosecutions play out, or do we vote against having a season 2 and we descend into fascism?
Mm-hmm.
That's where I'm at.
All right.
Yeah, well put. Jim, I want you to also chime in on anything that's on your mind.
Well, I hope we do not leave this conversation without a Quincy sighting.
Hi, Quincy.
Yeah. Quincy's been is getting politicized. He heard me talking about the cat lady who got thrown off of the prospective Trump organization jury, and he wants to stand up and say, he's non-political, and guy.
He's standing up for the cat ladies' rights.
Yeah, well, no. You can't have cat ladies on juries. It's just like they're renowned for holding out no matter what.
But Quincy's okay with dog ladies.
Pug masters are good jurors. You know what?
So what I would like to ask Quincy, if you could vote, who would you vote for, and what do you recommend people in America do on November 8th?
Quincy's holding up his left paw here. He leans left.
Excellent. Oh, Marty, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. And thank you for the Quincy visit. Yeah, that was brilliant. Yeah, that's why we had to interview Marty. It was just very important to hear what he had to say, and also to know that there are actions we can take. We don't have to just sit and take this assault, this authoritarian capture. We can vote, and we can focus on the structural changes that need to happen once we retain the House and the Senate in November. And just, from a tax man getting down to brass tacks, there are more things to care about than taxes. Talking to the extreme right, there are more things to care about. You're not going to like fascism. We've proven that in 47 episodes that, fascism is not even good for the fascists. And I think that that's an important takeaway from this episode as well as last episode.
Right. And I do want to point out to our audience, like, everyone loves the movie The Untouchables, right? And that is when, Elliot Ness, here comes the tax man to save the country from Al Capone and the mobsters. And that is pretty much what we're facing right now. So vote. We don't have much time left. I'm voting for season 2,
Me too. How about you, Jim?
Yeah, season 2 is going to be pretty challenging. So
yeah,
either way, suit up and fucking vote. Right
on. Yeah, and speaking of effing voting, speaking of fucking voting, why not? I want to leave with a message from a woman that I met at the Women's March on Washington 2017. She's 100 years old. She was 100 years old when she arrived. She could no longer walk, so she came in a wheelchair, and she was present for this very important day in women's history because she was born 3 years before women could even vote. and she knew what was at stake. And so she showed up, Mary Parker from Ann Arbor, Michigan, and she told all of us not to take any of this for granted and to work harder. And I know I've been working harder, and the gentleman beside me have been working harder. So let's hear from Mary Parker.
What is the most important message you can tell the generations that are coming up? What can you tell them that you've seen after 10 decades?
I tell them to keep going and keep working.